Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Composers at Home, Maybe Drinking Coffee. Uh, I'm going to put the name placard on there. There's my name, Elliot Miles McKinley. I hope everybody's doing great post Turkey Day. Whatever your eating proclivities may have been, I hope that they were good ones. I hope that you spent time with people that were important to spend time with, if it's family or friends or both. And so here we are in December. Uh, it doesn't quite feel like December here in Boston entirely. It's kind of been a weird winter so far. I don't know where how weather has been where you're watching. Um, Tonight, before we get started, and I introduced my guest, I would like to say, please say hello. I'm monitoring the chat here. I have Facebook and YouTube. So if you're watching and would just like to say hello, that would be really awesome if you could just say hello. Um, and of course, comment, ask us questions. Our guest is, I think you'll find, is not only a great composer, but a very interesting and wonderful person. So, anyway, and I'd be remiss if I didn't do the usual social media plugs. So, if you like what we're doing, we being me, please subscribe to the channel and like us up over on Facebook, Composers at Home, maybe drinking coffee, and I'll there's the mug that cost me about $20, but it's actually a decent mug. So anyway, so great. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce the guest for this evening. He's a gentleman that I met. Oh, let's not count how many years ago, but I met him when we were both graduate students at the University of Michigan, and um, although we haven't seen each other for many years, I have been tickled to watch him do his thing, and so it's a really great for me to be able to have him today on the show, Daniel Bernard Roumain, a DBR, and so I'm going to bring him into our scene here, and there he is for the world. Daniel, thank you so much, man, for coming on the show and spending a little time with me tonight. It's a real pleasure. And um, so uh, so I we had a little pre-show chat, very short pre-show chat, but I think I'll
Yep.
ask you again. How are you doing in this interesting 2020? I know it's a big question, but uh, how are you, man?
Oh, I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
It's my
And
pleasure.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm mindful of time in a time of pandemic, specifically
Hmm.
COVID-19. I'm mindful that in our conversation, which requires breath,
Yeah.
someone somewhere is taking their last breath.
Right. Right.
So, with that in mind, I know that in this frame of privilege and
Hmm.
purpose,
Hmm.
um, I think about what are the rights and role and responsibilities of the living,
Right. Right. Yeah.
and I think it's joy and
Right.
to to embody joy without guilt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and of course uh, we can expound upon this. Certainly, one thing that I'm going to be asking you, of course, is about your own personal journey and your journey with music, and your journey to being a composer, and your and what you how you've defined that role for yourself as a composer, and to say this to speak the music that is true to you. Um, but also, you bring up a very good point, and a point that I think many people are thinking about, which is that of a kind of uh, sobriety and responsibility, and certainly something like COVID has framed that for us very sharply, because we're a fairly um, humans like to think that we are invincible, and then realize that sometimes we're not as invincible as we think we are. And you know, this happens. You know, pandemics happen, and sadly it will happen again. Probably not in our lifetimes, but in some future 100 years or whatever the case may be. Nature has a way of doing this, and these certainly force anybody living through these times. You know, what's that saying? May you be blessed to live in interesting times,
Mm, yeah,
right?
yeah,
Um, and they can be times of stress, but they can also be great times of growth as well. And I think that's um, if to kind of frame a little bit what you were saying, is that to live with joy um, is not to live without responsibility, but to live with joyful responsibility, and
yeah,
then to make something positive for others around us. And that um, it's very easy, I think, when we're not being pressured by something like a pandemic or other social issues that are ever present, that it's easy to ignore. It's easy to kind of get into the you know, that kind of myopic space of like, you know, I'm just going to do my thing and that's it, right? So anyway,
yeah.
those are very good words I think to uh, if you will, well, bless isn't the right word, perhaps, but perhaps to get our conversation started, to the induction of, if you will, of our conversation. Um,
Yeah.
oh, great! Magic says love Daniel's work. That's a comment that came in. Thank you
Oh,
very
yeah,
much.
yeah. Magic Orchestra. They're amazing. They're based out in San Francisco. The great Mina Choi started that group, and they're amazing. Very young, talented orchestral musicians. They gave the West Coast premiere of Johnny Greenwood's
Oh
the
yeah,
soundtrack he did for
yeah. Right.
There Shall Be Blood, and they've done a lot of different collaborations. Everyone from Sting to
Mm-hmm.
a lot of great singers, songwriters, composers, of course. So yeah, they're
Right.
great.
Right.
Magic Orchestra. Right on.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for watching. Um, so Daniel, I would, uh, you know, spending time with you as a graduate student, we were in a very different space about some 30 years ago, 25 years ago.
Mm.
So, um, but let's back up a little bit before that time. And question I ask every guest that comes on the show is, what drew you to music? What were some of your earliest, if you will, memories of music, and did you feel a pull towards music, and how did you begin your journey in music?
Well, simply, I was probably born into it in that my earliest memories are always about music, banging on pots and pans,
Mm-hmm.
listening to my father, listen to his record collections.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I started playing the violin when I was 5 years old. I feel like that instrument chose me.
Mm-hmm.
And it never really stopped. I mean, I tried to not be passionate about music. Not,
Right.
I tried really hard not to be obsessed by it.
Right.
I played sports. I played football. I wrestled. I ran track.
Right.
I did other things, but certainly by the time I got to high school, that was it. I mean, there
It
was
was it
no other
decided.
choice.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
decided. Yeah, I went to Performing Arts High School,
Mm-hmm.
found myself at Vanderbilt, found myself at University of Michigan, found myself in Harlem in 1997. I'm in Brooklyn right now,
Mm-hmm.
between Brooklyn, Norwood, and Tempe at Arizona State University, proudly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think my journey really began in a lot of ways with the violin,
Yeah.
Mr. Miller, my first music teacher, and just obsession. I mean, it was, I just remember hours and hours and hours in my bedroom learning every kind of record: Motley Crue,
Yeah.
Prince,
Yeah.
Al
Yeah.
Stewart. Barry White,
Yeah.
Isaac Hayes,
Yeah.
Michael Jackson, Jackson 5.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of guitar and all those licks, a lot of piano, a lot of synthesizer,
Yeah.
my own little made up drum kit.
Mm-hmm.
And just doing it. And then, you find other friends
Like-minded friends, of
like
course.
mine,
Yeah.
and we started
Right.
jamming in the garage, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it was constant. School got in the way,
You're right.
you know?
Right. As it
Yeah.
usually does
School
at
got in
that
the
sort of point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a good indication. I mean, I think we're both fathers
I'm
now.
not, but I mean, I
Oh, I
consider
thought you were.
yeah,
You got that father thing, man.
I do. You know, it's funny actually. Last 2 weeks ago, I had Jared Tate on the show. I don't know if you
Oh,
know
yeah.
Jared.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Jared, I've known Jared for many years, and so and Jared actually thought the same thing. He said because he was talking about his son,
Uh,
and Jared was like, "Oh man, I thought you were a dad," and I'm like, maybe I just look like a dad. You know, maybe I got that
no, no,
dad
you're good.
vibe. I don't know. You know,
Got good
I consider
empathy.
at this point my students end up being kind of like my
Sure. Absolutely.
adopted children that I can get frustrated at and also be proud
Yeah.
of. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
so
Well, I was going to say, as a parent, that's one way to understand what your children might want to do. Just
hmm
see where their obsessions lie. My son is obsessed with sports.
hmm
Really obsessed with baseball and competition in general.
yeah, yeah,
And I think a healthy way. But he loves to compete. He
yeah,
loves he loves not just the physicality of sports, but the camaraderie with other boys.
sure, sure.
He
Which is a
loves it.
big part of I
Yeah,
think of the
yeah.
team sport
Yep.
thing.
He
Yeah.
is. He's a team player, and he likes to lead and rally, and he's all in. And I don't see that changing. He's
hmm
not. He doesn't have an obsessive pulse for music.
Well,
Doesn't really bring him joy. And that's okay,
right.
because baseball, basketball, right now, especially baseball, brings him a lot of joy.
Nice, nice.
That's his thing.
Well, everybody has their own path, and I think, of course, now not speaking as a parent,
Yeah.
but having nieces and nephews,
Yep.
and basically being an observer,
Oh yeah.
I think that
Right on.
a challenge, but also I think a joy of parenting is watching your child navigate different um, different spaces of interest, and then finding like when that spark happens of like, hey, oh wow, this is really like a thing, like I'm really interested in this. And it may not be, I mean, uh, you're a professional musician, composer, whatever, and of course that's your world, but it's not going to necessarily be your kid's world.
Mm.
And that's I think a lot of parents kind of go through that kind of that little sort of up and down of like, well, maybe my child won't take after me in that regard, but allowing the child to that space to sort of find themselves, I think is a obviously it's a key to successful parenting. I think is that you're giving your son that space, uh, and I don't think you would not do that,
Yeah.
in that regard. So speaking of space, how did your parents take to your uh, passion of music?
Oh, how did they take to it?
Well, I mean,
Almost.
I don't want to ask an
Yeah.
incendiary question, man, but I'm just curious, since we were
Yeah.
on that topic.
Yeah. No, they were very supportive. They saw music education as one small part of my
Sure.
total education,
Yeah.
an important part. I shouldn't say small part. They
Yeah.
saw it as one facet, one
Mm-hmm.
aspect of my total education.
Mm-hmm.
That's important.
Mm-hmm.
wasn't intrusive or additive. It
Yeah.
was actually it was an integral part. That's even a better word. It was an integral part.
Right.
So they were always very supportive. So that means paying for stuff. That means
Yeah.
showing up at things.
Yeah. Right.
And they did. And my father
Right.
worked long and hard. My mother worked long and hard.
Yeah.
I appreciate that now more than ever.
Yeah.
But they went to a lot of recitals, a lot of rehearsals, a lot of private lessons. It's not easy. There were three of us,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
they invested. They made the commitment, and
Yeah.
I think the best thing is I can. My father passed away, and April 22nd, 2013 at 1:07 p.m. But my
Mm.
mother lives on, and I'm helping to take care of her and
Yeah.
making sure she has all that she needs, and
Yeah.
that's all through music,
Yeah.
my career in music.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. It's a the pay you paying that forward
Yeah,
with love and your own, through your making that through your own,
yep,
what you did,
yeah.
um, the so here you are. Well, what drew you to the violin though? It's a curious instrument because you just mentioned listening to all these like sort of bands of the 80s,
Yeah.
and everything from R&B and rock and probably hip hop and other things that were kind of in your ear. What drew you to the violin?
I'm never quite sure. It is a hard instrument, and
Right.
I play it in a hard way. I mean, I'm in some ways I don't have all the skills that some of these younger players do. That's for sure. But I have a real maturity, and I have a really good relationship with the instrument. Now, I could play the violin. I play, 5 string, 6 string instruments. I use a lot of electronics.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
It's
Yeah.
much more like a guitar in a way,
Uh-huh.
I would
Uh-huh.
say. But I have a fluid, there's a fluency I have with the instrument now that took 45 years, quite frankly.
Yeah, right. Right.
What drew me to it was always the sound.
Okay.
I think it was the sound, and at some point, believe it or not, it was the frustration with it, because it takes a long time to learn how to play the violin well. It just
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
But then there was, I don't know, at a certain point there was a breakthrough, and I started realizing, particularly by the time I got to New York,
Mm-hmm.
that if I use certain effects, if I could approach the instrument electronically, but also intimately
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
even powerfully, I
Yeah.
think one of the things I loved about when I was in New York was starting to understand plugging into a venue's sound system,
Mm-hmm.
really using their subwoofers,
Right.
you know,
Suddenly the violin doesn't sound much like a violin anymore, right?
not at all. And
Right.
it got really exciting.
You're a
Yeah, I
member of
mean,
the band now.
yeah,
You
and
know?
and I was kind of already doing that in high school
Right.
and certainly in college, but everything changed in New York. I was able to really go there with it
Yeah.
and find an audience for it.
Uh-huh. Sure. Sure.
On New York Times website right now, you can check it out in the music section. There's this great little 9-minute video
Mm.
on how Prince created the Sign of the Times track.
Okay. Yeah.
And what's cool about it is you have all the principal players, Susan Rogers, who was there.
Mm-hmm.
Susan Rogers is incredible. I think she's teaching at Berkeley now.
Mm.
But she's, I think more than anyone, more than probably um, Wendy Melvoin. Prince was engaged to Susanna Melvoin,
Oh,
Prince's
right.
sister.
Yeah. Yeah.
But more than Sheila Eve, I think Susan Rogers was in the room. She says that's the way she says it, and it's true. She spent 4 years with Prince every day,
Mm-hmm.
every day. So she talks about his process, which is always the same and pretty simple. He has an idea for a song, doesn't talk much. He's not really engaging with her, but they're sitting next to each other, and
Mm-hmm.
he says go, and he just starts laying down these tracks
Uh-huh.
one after the other. And
Uh-huh.
Sign of the Times, he's using a Fairlight system, which I've used. It's a great
Uh-huh.
system. So he does the bass, the way she describes it. Actually, it's always interesting to me that the way she describes it, he starts with the bass lines first, then
Interesting.
does the drums,
Kind of a
then layers everything. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
and what's cool is, looks like they have found the individual tracks.
Mm.
So they're kind of
The
taking you
stem
through,
so you
like,
can do that.
the stems. Yeah, man,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
right.
and they're showing you, like, okay, so this is him playing the bass line. Then
Yeah.
he added the drums, and then
Yeah.
does the vocal. And then she says at the very end, after the track is done, he adds the guitar. This is my point.
Yeah.
So they're playing a little bit of his guitar, and it's just so fluid. Man, it's
Sure.
like it's probably 10 seconds of
Uh,
just his, track. You could hear the noise around it. You could hear the bleed.
okay. Right,
It's
right,
probably what he
right.
was listening to, because
Yeah,
you could
yeah,
hear it,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
and man, the fluidity. You cannot teach
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah,
He goes
right.
from a little bit of melody to a chord to,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
whew,
yeah.
you get a chance, check that out
I will. I will.
because it's like
I will. That
I don't
sounds
think
really interesting.
yeah, I don't think classical musicians quite understand what it means to make a track as opposed to being a part of a track. You dig?
Right,
There's a
right.
difference.
There is a difference,
There's a
right?
difference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I had to figure that out as an electronic violinist. I mean, what was
Uh-huh.
so cool for me is that I've working with DJ Spooky.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, he's
He's
great.
playing, sometimes three, four tracks at once.
Yeah, right.
And I gotta find a hole. So now, yeah, you put the bow in your mouth, and I'm now, I'm comping
Right,
or doing things
right.
that, like, in a way, it's the only thing I can do. And then suddenly everything goes away, and it's just a bass line. And now
Now
I
you've got
can
some
go.
space, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, right,
exactly.
right.
And it's so loving. I mean, I hope the estate publishes more stems. You're exactly right, by the way.
Yeah,
Stems for your audience are the individual tracks
yeah.
that comprise the finished track of a song
Yep.
or anything or
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
any kind of musical number, right? And what was so loving about hearing that is I really appreciate the New York Times doing that. They did a lot of research, They're
It
interviewing,
sounds like
well,
it. Yeah,
Susan
it
Rogers,
seems like
yeah.
super
Well,
super fascinating too from a just
yeah,
a historical and also musical point of view,
yeah.
you
What's
know.
so kind of staggering is, he's and I get it. He's a Midwestern guy,
Mm-hmm.
like Michael Jackson, like Madonna. They were all
Yep.
born within just a few years of each other.
Yeah,
She's the only
yeah.
one who survived, but that's a work ethic, right?
Yep.
Like
Yes, it is.
that's
It's
the
that
way
kind of
Susan talks about it. Yeah, he
yeah.
comes in. I'm not talking to you. There's work to be done.
Right. Right.
And by the way, when it's all done, he wants a cassette tape. And then he goes out into the car and invites the band, and they go driving throughout
Go drive around to
Minneapolis,
listen to it. Yeah.
listening to it over and over again. I mean,
Right. Right.
that's a cool dude.
Yeah.
That is
Absolutely.
a cool dude, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of people, well, I shouldn't say a lot of people. I think a lot of people are now really realizing this now, after his passing, was just what a uh, incredibly curious and multifaceted and deep musician that he was, and much more so than one might glimpse, say,
Yeah.
Prince as sort of like the pop artist that he was, of course, but he was way more than that in terms of just the way that he, just as you mentioned, um, and it's funny. There's a track on Herbie's River record, the Joni Letters. I don't know if you know that record, but they're all Joni Mitchell tunes,
Yeah.
and it's kind of a loving tribute. Herbie Hancock just gives us such a great kind of treatment of these tunes. But on one of the tunes, and it's not listed on the record because Prince didn't want it listed initially on the record. But he's playing guitar. He's backing on one of the tracks. It's Edith and the Kingpin,
Mm-hmm.
and he's playing guitar, and Tina Turner's singing. And the funny thing is that when you hear that, like when I first heard it, I didn't know, of course, know it was Prince playing. And then later I'm like, oh wow. And he's so understated. He just wanted to be on the record because he loved the music.
Mm-hmm.
And he loved the music, and he loved Herbie, and he loved Tina Turner. In other words, he just wanted to be part of it. And he didn't want he didn't want anybody to like say, like, oh, this record has Prince on it kind of thing, right? So that was,
Mm-hmm.
he just sort of removed himself from the thing just to be part of it. And I think that kind of says a lot also about him as a musician, and also as somebody who just cares about the music, and is sort of not after like a quick cash grab, or whatever the case may be, right? Um, so yeah, I have a lot of respect for Prince as an artist, and it's only grown since, I don't know, the last, I don't know, 20 years, 15, 20 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So uh, so kind of spooling back to you, as I'm going to
Oh,
spool back to
sure.
DBR. The um, So what pulled you in the direction of composing? I mean, well, I mean, if you can give us some a broad or even specific notion of like what sort of pulled you into like this strange place of being a composer, or do you think about the term composer because the term composer, uh, some artists don't like to be labeled as composers. They like to be
Yeah.
labeled maybe as sound artists or as um, what are some of the other terms? Music creators or producers.
Hmm.
I mean the contemporary definition of producer envelops a lot of what composition is. You know, in addition to like the audio engineering and the software manipulation and all that kind of stuff. Um, but I don't know. What are your thoughts about that? And also, like, how did you locate yourself as a composer when you were younger? What brought you into
Yeah.
that universe?
Oh, always compulsion. So, I felt a deep desire. I remember, I was probably 8 years old when I first felt it, but I waited till I was like 9 to actually act on it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a compulsion. I heard things. I heard music. I would dream and hear music. I still do.
Yeah, yeah.
And the compulsion gets so great that you are compelled to write it down. In
Uh-huh.
order,
Interesting.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
you're compelled to share it.
yeah.
And I remember that too. I didn't really know what I was doing. I mean, I was in what, third grade, fourth grade.
Uh-huh.
I was taking violin lessons. I was reading
Right,
music, but it's not the
right.
same. I just remember asking Mr. Miller, a few other people, okay, you know, like this is the melody. This is what I hear. How do I write that down? And just struggling to do it. I remember making up my own key signatures, kind
Well,
of,
of
kind of
course.
making
I
up.
mean, you know, right,
Yeah, nobody
right,
told me. I didn't
right,
know.
right.
These were the notes that were sharp. Making up my own notation, even in a way.
Sure.
I just, excuse me, I had to get it out.
Yeah.
So, and then like anything else, you just get better at it. I remember I ran home one day. I wrote something down. I was so excited by it. And I started making up songs, writing the lyrics down.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the other thing I learned quickly is that if you have like other people, even in fifth grade, I had a drum kit player, bass player. There was a group of us,
Mm-hmm.
and we just started making songs up.
Yeah,
So that
yeah,
was like on a Saturday. On
yeah,
Sunday, I
yeah.
would go to youth orchestra rehearsal. They were very separate.
Yeah.
I
Interesting.
kept them separate until I got to high school.
Right. Yeah.
Then I just stopped. I stopped separating the two. I
Right.
literally
Right.
smashed them together.
Yeah. 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 Was that there wasn't anybody uh it doesn't sound like it from what you just said, but there wasn't anybody saying that those worlds should be separate, right? There was nobody telling you that
Oh,
because it
sure there were. I had great teachers. I had really bad teachers.
sure, as we all do, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's important. Mr. Charles Noble, if you're out there, was a horrible teacher. Horrible, horrible. Self-consumed. He was
Charles,
in the
if you're
youth orchestra.
watching, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
I always wonder about that guy. I mean, just yelling at people, yelling at me.
Oh man.
I asked him for a recommendation after I don't know how many years of playing for him. Spelled my name wrong, couldn't use it.
Oh
I was too
man.
sheepish to go back and ask him to spell my name correctly. He's a large white man doing what he thought was right, and
Hmm.
it was just wrong. Race plays into this, of course it
Yeah,
does,
yeah, yeah,
because
right.
the insensitivity of
Yeah, sure, sure.
Mrs. Black, white woman, first year teacher. Um, I was in what, seventh or eighth grade, I can't remember, maybe ninth grade. Horrible. You
Wow.
know,
Yeah.
she meant well. She meant well. I know she meant well. Maybe she's out there listening, but it's not enough to mean well as a teacher. You've
Hmm.
got to, especially when you have a talented cat like me, who like. I remember she was misunderstanding my orchestral rehearsal antics for disrespect
Ah, yeah.
instead of
Yeah.
challenging them with music.
In other
The way,
words,
by the way, her predecessor, Miss Griffiths, did. See, Miss Griffiths, great. If you're out there, praise my white woman. But she was the first one that said, "Hey, why are you keeping the band like separate from what you do? Why didn't you bring them into the orchestra rehearsal?" why don't you write something for the orchestra and
Ah,
your
yeah,
little funk band?
yeah, yeah.
And I did. She's like, why don't you take over rehearsal? I'm not going to go over here and read the newspaper. I'm going to go here and check you out. But why
Right,
don't you lead rehearsal?
right,
And I did.
right.
And
Wow.
she absolutely, and I was so sad. She retired like, or she went into something else the very next year.
Oh
That's when
man,
Mrs. Black came.
I see.
And you know what's
So,
crazy about that? I had
yeah.
never talked about this. I want to say that she was my sixth grade orchestra teacher,
Okay.
maybe sixth and seventh.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Then Miss Black came in eighth. I think that's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Miss Black was so bad. If I'm remembering it correctly, that's the year that I quit orchestra. I almost quit the violin. I
Oh
almost quit
man.
music.
Man.
I almost quit
Wow.
music.
Wow.
And had Miss Griffith not left, I think I would be a better, even a better musician than I am.
Sure, sure. Because that's,
Yeah.
this is here you are. I mean, these are in very formative years.
Hmm.
Uh and
Very formative.
yeah, and very impressionable years, right? I mean,
Very
because
impressive.
here you are, you're thinking, well, obviously this person must know what they're doing. I'm who am I,
Yeah.
I'm right. So you're gonna respect your elder
Yeah.
for telling you this or that. And to have someone uh uh I mean, it's I, I think I'm kind of glad I asked the question because I was sort of not going to ask this question, but like the I've I was fortunate, very lucky when I grew up to uh to see not like these sort of separations between sort of genres or styles or whatever it is, just to see the whole panoply of music and uh not worry too much about one thing should be one way and the other thing should be the other way, and that's just the way it always was and the way it always should be. It's like, well, who says that, right?
Yeah.
Who says that you can't do your thing? I mean, because ultimately it's going to be really interesting if it's good and you got your heart into it, you passion into it, and clearly, uh, and then to have somebody basically just sort of kind of squash, sort of step on you, like sort of like, now you can't do that. Like,
Yeah.
who does that to someone, to a kid in eighth grade?
Well, that's the lesson for parents. Yet again, if your child tells you that your teacher, that their teacher isn't good, listen up. Believe them.
Right,
Get involved.
because that may very well be the case. Yeah,
That's right.
exactly.
Not every teacher has your child's best interest in mind.
Right, 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 right. And as a parent, you put a lot of trust in these other sort of
Yeah.
people that are uh, influencing your children for
Yeah.
long stretches of time when you're not able to.
Yeah.
And that's a very good it's a very good thing to say. And I can only imagine for you as a parent, one of those, because of your own experience, you must be kind of I don't say extra vigilant, but just kind of in a sense that you're paying attention to
Yeah.
what's happening,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, David Gaines says hello. Sorry, I just looking over here to
Well,
see if we have.
welcome.
David Gaines is a composer. He's a friend of mine. He's popped in. He said, I can't stick around right now, but I saw DBR's bio and I look forward to watching this as I return later. Thanks,
Cool.
man. Sorry you have to split. Um, so, um, but obviously you persevered,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
You navigated past a couple of poor teachers who did not have your best interests in mind. And so um, your uh, in high school and then into college, um, were you already doing? I mean, were you already bringing all the worlds and interests together in your compositional sort of life that, much as you do now? Was that always kind of a thing that from from those unfortunate experiences where you were told not to,
Yeah.
did you say, okay, well, I'm going to do it anyways and bring it together from an early age?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely did. So by the time I got to Vanderbilt, I was combining, well, I was playing electric violin. I was combining funk and hip hop and jazz even. Within classical music, I was working with dancers, I was working with film artists. I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
definitely multidisciplinary,
Yeah.
hyper collaborative.
Mm-hmm.
I was determined. I was angry, angry, chip on my shoulder, and and productive, like
Uh-huh.
creating.
Uh-huh.
I was. It's a funny thing to say. I would have multiple pieces on those composer recitals, forums, whatever they called them.
Right. The yeah.
To the point where they made a rule for me. Could only have one piece.
It can't be Daniel's
Yeah.
recital every month.
I tell you what. I tell you what. Yeah, because it started on the composers forums. I'd have two or three pieces, and then I started figuring, oh, if I got my peers to play like a violin piece
This
of
other
mine or piano, they put it on the Friday, school. It was at Vanderbilt, whatever it
yeah,
was.
yeah, yeah, right,
I had
right.
a couple pieces on there because I figured that out,
Yeah.
and then the school figured out, okay, no matter what it is, you can only have one thing on the one
The
thing.
D, the DBR rule was put
Oh
into
yeah,
effect,
of
right?
course. Yeah, yeah. I was just going, and then I started doing a lot of stuff in Nashville. So I started doing stuff in clubs. I was doing it
Mm-hmm.
in high school, Miami and Fort
Mm-hmm.
Lauderdale. But then I started working. You know, I always saw myself as, not that I'm a singer songwriter, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
worked into those circuits, into those spheres.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I started playing for, Nashville singers and stuff like that. I
Mm-hmm.
started working with all different types of artists in
Yeah.
Nashville. There's a lot of
Yeah.
different music. Nashville's very
Oh,
eclectic.
Nashville's got a lot of. It's got a heavy
Very eclectic.
scene. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was in a couple of world music groups and like djembe and stuff like that. So I was doing a lot of different things with a lot of different musicians and artists.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And never really stopped, actually. Just never
Right.
really
Right.
stopped.
It sounds like that's basically now X number of years later. You're doing the same thing. You're just
Yeah,
you just have more experience. So
yeah,
I and I want to play some music. I think it would be good in
yeah.
a few minutes. Maybe we'll play something.
Be great. Yeah.
But so it's a big question. You can answer it as bigly or as littly as you want. But so from say those days to now, where you're drawing on everything that you want to do.
Yeah.
You're a multidisciplinary artist, performer, composer, all of these things. What would you say um, is your what have you learned about your own process in those years? And what are you able to do now that, let's say, you weren't able to do to your, say, 20-year-old self?
Oh, keep my temper in check. No, I'm a much, I feel like I'm a true arts administrator. I
Mm.
serve on several
Mm.
boards. I
Mm-hmm.
teach
Mm-hmm.
um, as I mentioned, at Arizona State University, but I also am a visiting scholar at Dartmouth this
Mm-hmm.
year.
This year, yeah.
Um, and I've actually taught at Vanderbilt. I've taught at, of course,
Mm-hmm.
what do I say? Have visited class. Well, I was a visiting professor at Vanderbilt years
Mm-hmm.
ago,
Mm-hmm.
and then I did a series, and I keep doing a series of lectures at the University of Michigan,
Yeah, right.
and a lot of different places actually.
Sure.
I mean, just lecturing, and how that goes.
Yeah, right.
I'm very proud about that. So I think I'm a good teacher. I think I'm a good contributor. I use the word contributor, actually. I don't use the word teacher or student. We're all contributors to a classroom and world of
Mm-hmm.
ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm a good contributor. I think I'm a very good collaborator.
Sure.
And that took a long time. I couldn't do that when I was collaborating, but I'm much better at it now.
Okay, right. Right.
I think I'm a pretty good negotiator. I can negotiate my own contract and others.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm pretty good at looking at, especially on an institutional level. I can look at where an organization wants to go,
Okay.
and I can delineate a path for them,
Sure.
which
Sure.
is not easy to do. I'm doing
No.
that. I'm the creative chair at the Flynn Center in Burlington, Vermont,
Okay.
and as the creative chair, which is essentially at its core an administrative role,
Mm-hmm.
I'm helping guide them
Yeah.
through a
Yeah.
series of changes, actually.
Yeah.
I couldn't have really done that in my 20s. And
Sure.
I think in I think maybe most importantly, I I know as a black person, my value,
Mm-hmm.
my debt,
Mm-hmm.
my
Mm-hmm.
my my place, my well, I shouldn't say it that way.
Right.
My
Yeah.
my responsibility towards the BIPOC artistic community.
Right. Right.
So in that sense, I'm activist.
Right.
I have said and will continue to say things that because my reputational risk isn't the same as someone who's in their 20s,
Ah, right. Right.
meaning I
You
have a
you
little more
can
collateral to give.
you can say
Yeah.
more with more. Yeah. Yeah. You
Without
can
fear of
without fear of, yeah.
loss of income or opportunity, which is a
Sure.
real thing, particularly for BIPOC artists.
Yeah. Right.
I can
Right.
say, and this is matter of fact, that Peter Gelb, the general manager at the Met, is racist.
Mm-hmm.
He's racist.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean he's a bad person? No, I don't know about that. But what I'm getting at is
Right.
that his racism maybe isn't malice,
Sure. Sure.
but it's
But
malady.
it's mallet.
He
Right.
It's malady,
Mm-hmm.
clearly. The
Mm-hmm.
policies of the Met are, without question, look, that's an easy thing to quantify. The Met has never, in its 100 plus year history,
Mm-hmm.
commissioned a person of color.
Right.
So
The data speaks for itself, right? You
that's
don't
just
even
one.
doesn't
That's just
even
one. Right.
right, 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 right.
That's just one aspect.
Right.
Okay. So that's what I'm getting at. That
Yeah.
I can say these things publicly. I can articulate these things publicly,
Right.
and hopefully, by the way, Elliot, by saying these things and being strategic about how I say these things,
Right.
to change.
Yeah, sure, sure. And I think that it's important. It's important not only for you to say these things, but it's important for others to speak up as well,
Yeah.
who witness the same, if someone else witnesses the same kind of thing happening, and there's data, like you said, there's not like you're just making stuff up. People should speak up, right? I think that's the responsibility for all of us if we're going to see substantive change and a more fair and a just world, right? That there should be opportunity for everybody, not just for the select few. And this has always been an issue. Well, this is a huge subject, man. I want to play some music, but I do want to say this has been, this has been an issue in many aspects of life, but also, but the small little piece of cultural space that you and I work in the sort of the quote unquote classical music world, these, for lack of better term, these gatekeepers have, they guard the gates with not with, kind of going back to your teachers, not with everybody's best interests in mind, right?
Yeah.
And there are agendas.
Yeah.
And the agendas are, as you point out, they can be racist agendas. They can be agendas that are overtly malicious, or they can be, I think you used the term, what did you use, malady? Like not overtly, like, oh, let's hurt that person, but just kind of unaware, right? Sort of a kind of a lack of awareness can also generate that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's an affliction. It's an affliction.
Yeah, right. And then it can leave, you think about all the opportunities that end up with really wonderful musicians and artists. You think a lot of opportunities that aren't had, and then those people go, well, maybe this isn't for me, and then they do something completely different. We never hear those voices.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and I think this is, Jared said this a couple weeks ago. He said, things that people maybe don't realize is that actually the ocean of, say, the classical music world is large, and there's room for everybody. It's just that there are some people that like to keep the if you will, the harbor, the access to the ocean. They like to keep that closed off.
Yeah.
You're right. But I think the ocean is big for everybody to do their thing. And I think that's, it's it's a long time coming, and I think change is happening. You said in one of your videos, because I did watch a little bit of some of the videos. You said, I think you were speaking about your relationship to change,
Hmm.
and and asking sort of the question to your audience in your show, what was their relationship to change, right? Were they scared by the change, or are they, are what's how does that work, right? And I think all of us have to ask that question: what is our relationship to change, whatever that change may be? And is that change positive? Is it impacting a greater number of people or a lesser number of people? Like how is that working to benefit everybody, right? So I don't know. It's a huge subject, man. It's and I want to play some music, but thank you for bringing that up.
Oh, of course.
You're welcome. You're what? This is your space. You're welcome to call out anybody else you want.
Oh, I'm
But
sure I will.
try. We can. But anyway, let's listen to some of your music, man.
Okay.
So I think the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra
Yeah.
piece is one we're gonna queue up.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
I'll
The title of which is "I am a white person who blank black people," and the
right.
blank means you fill in the blank.
You fill in the blank with what
Yeah,
your own.
that's right.
Yeah.
Thoughts are
Uh,
words, sentence, association, yeah,
right. Right.
relationship. So yeah, it's an
Yeah.
interesting title. It's a title of the time. Talking about a sign of the times.
Sure. Sure.
It's a title definitely of the time.
Yeah. Let's check it out. The first movement is how long?
About 5 minutes.
About five
So
minutes. Let's
maybe
check.
six, maybe six.
Okay, let's check out the first movement. We can come back and we can talk about the music, and we can talk also more about the title, and
Yeah,
maybe we'll have some questions. So,
sure.
okay, so let me switch views here, and let's listen to this. All right, man, that was beautiful.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
so I'm gonna switch. We just went back to the normal view here, and I'll go over and see if we have any comments in the interim. But whoops, I want to play it with YouTube. Okay. So just a quick practical question. Did you decide before writing the piece, or was it commissioned to not have winds, or was that a COVID decision, or because I noticed it was just strings and percussion? Was that something that was part of the? Would that have been the case if it was not for COVID?
Yeah, I would assume so. Yeah, it was a COVID decision. So
Okay, got it.
there was no way to have wind,
Sure.
woodwinds or brass or
Right.
anybody not on a mask
Yeah.
full 100% of the time on the stage. So
Yeah. Yeah.
unfortunately, it comes down to strings and percussion.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And obviously, not even the full string because it
Yeah.
came down to actual the numbers of bodies on the stage. So
Right.
even that meant reduced
For
strings,
for the
one
restriction.
percussion, one timpani
Yeah.
player, and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, first of all, beautiful theme.
Oh, thank you.
One thing that uh, I say this a lot with composers that whose music I resonate with, and it's a kind of a thing that I can't say about everybody's music, but is that you're not afraid of the melody. You're not afraid
Oh,
to let you know
yeah.
to go with to run with it, right? And sometimes uh people sort of like, well, it seems like, how can you write a melody, kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
like, dude, if the melody's there, write it.
Yeah.
um and uh so what was interesting is you have this theme that you are sort of long lined theme. Then you have these little stabs of dissonance that kind of come in at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I don't know. So obviously the title is incredibly provocative. And I guess I'm gonna ask a specific question about the title, or maybe not a specific. I mean, the title is specifically is intentional. But did you were you writing the music before you were conceiving the title, or was it kind of the title came like, I'm curious where in the process did the title come in, and how informed were your musical choices based on sort of your own thoughts about a title that is that strong, right? Because
Yeah.
titles do, they say something,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. All titles say something.
Right.
All of them.
Right.
All of them. So yeah, the title came first, definitely. In some ways, I don't want to be give away too much, but
Sure.
in some ways, the music is literally kind of mouthing, singing the title. To tell you the truth, it's
Uh-huh.
in there.
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah. That might
So the
change
title
the way
came,
I hear it. Yeah, right.
yeah. So the
Yeah.
title comes first, and um, I think because the title came first, and every piece is different,
Sure.
um, and because the concept and the idea came first, or maybe before the music,
Mm-hmm.
it was then very easy to write. I was able. I mean, I only had like 3 weeks anyway. You didn't have a lot of time.
Yeah,
Actually, maybe
okay.
closer to two.
Yeah,
It was either
yeah.
2 or 3 weeks to get the thing done, and it's very easy to write because, as it's the case for a lot of my pieces, they're kind of already there.
Uh-huh.
The title for me, or the concept, just gives clarity to it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and then the
Mm-hmm.
actual working out of things. I mean, those chords that you're hearing, that's kind of like rave dissonant, whatever you want to call them, chords,
Yeah.
has to do with, well, not just conflict, but the fact of the matter is, it's very clear. Yeah, I'll say it this way.
Uh-huh.
Sure, the civil rights era led to a certain amount of success, but things are not resolved between races and
Absolutely.
culture and
Right.
identities
Right. Right.
in this country.
Right.
You still have one monolithic group, basically, not basically, fundamentally trying to marginalize all others. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's that's the simple,
Mm-hmm.
real clarity. That's not over.
Mm-hmm.
That's how this country was founded. That's where
Right.
we are now. And I have a feeling that's where we're most likely will always be. By always be, I mean one of the ironies of freedom is hatred. We don't talk
Yeah.
about that. We talk about love, right? But if
Yeah.
you're going to really look at it from a
Yeah.
scientific
Yeah.
point of
Yeah.
view,
You're right.
I have to be free. I can be free and hate
Yeah.
you,
Right.
right?
Right.
Freedom doesn't mean love.
No, no, you're
It
right.
actually
You're
means
right.
right.
Freedom's not free, right? There's that, right, that
Well,
notion of
freedom,
like,
freedom at its best is a broad
yeah,
embrace
right, right.
of
That's
many
interesting.
emotions.
Absolutely. Right.
We have
Right.
this hallmark thing
Right.
where we've decided that freedom should mean, but no, at its best, freedom is actually allowance. Allowance to love,
Right.
allowance to hate.
Right.
That's important. That's actually
Right.
really important.
Right.
How that gets resolved, I don't know. I don't think it ever
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a huge topic. And it's it's a really it's oh well, it's an important one.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm Captain Obvious over here saying it's important. But
Uh,
um I've actually been doing most of my adult life I've been sort of doing this kind of thinking. Uh, um, is And kind of to your point, it human beings are interesting creatures, and uh, the power to love and the power to hate is built within all of humanity. And I don't know. I don't know if I agree that it will never get resolved, but it sure is a long and not easy process uh, in terms of how we get to a spot as a species where we realize that there's like between everybody, we all come from basically 13 people basically. It depends on which is, if you look at the science, right, in terms of genetics, 13 people in Africa, Central Africa is basically where we all come from, right? This is like our, and so that should be a unifying point, but it's not a unifying point.
oh, no way.
You know what I mean? No, I
No,
know.
no, no,
It's
no.
it
Yeah.
seems right, but it should be, but it's not. And I think
Yeah.
what's going to happen is that there's going to have to be some external pressure, not just a virus, but like an alien invasion or something to kind of get all of us to go, oh shit, we should probably work
Well,
together. Like we should probably
uh,
not worry about these little differences about like somebody likes a different food and somebody whatever. It's like who cares about any of that? Because that really doesn't really matter. Because guess what's going to happen? You and I both have a lot in common. You know why? Because we're both going to die. We both have felt love. We both have felt pain. Like everyone on this planet knows all of those basic things, right?
sure, but picking up your your delineation of agreement, I don't know if this country can agree on its morality.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's
Let's
yeah,
start there,
right,
right? Can we
right.
agree
Yeah.
on morality?
See,
There are
that's
people in this
right.
country, right, who see my death as non-problematic.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start there, right? They don't have a problem separating my child from me.
Mm,
Matter of fact, there are
right.
some people in this country who feel that I should not be here, that would be more moral.
Yeah, right, right.
So just thinking about what you're saying,
Yeah.
which is agreement, a contract, can this country ever have a shared morality?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
without a shared morality, by the way, there could be no shared facts. What you just talked about requires,
Sure. It
Obama talks
requires
about this,
agreement.
about the Senator,
Absolutely. It
right?
requires implicit
That's right.
understanding of some
That's right.
basics, right?
That's right.
Yeah, right,
Well,
right,
because if
right,
you can't
right,
agree
right.
on facts, you can't exchange facts. So we
Right,
clearly don't agree on facts.
right.
That's clear,
There,
right?
there, and therein lies
Clearly we don't. I mean,
therein lies the
that's
rub,
right.
right?
That's right. My older and by the way, so there's three things here that you're hitting upon. This notion of broad community-based agreements. Shared morality is one
Hmm.
example.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
second thing is,
Yeah.
without shared morality, can we then agree on facts and exchange them? Don't know.
Hmm.
But here's the rub. The rub is how faith. Can we agree on how we define faith? My
Right.
older sister
Yeah.
didn't just vote for Trump, she loves him. So let me explain to you real quickly what
Okay.
that means. That
Okay.
means no matter
Yeah.
what he does, no matter what he does,
Yeah.
her response will be like a marriage. I will always forgive him. If he
Right.
actually
It's
killed someone,
there would be
I'm a
some
devout
justification.
person.
Yeah. Right.
That's right. I'm a devout person, Danny. So if Trump
Yeah.
were to
I know.
kill
I
someone
know. I know.
like my husband, I would still love and support. So faith is a much different
I know. I
situation, right?
know.
Than
I know.
facts
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
or agreement.
Man, I'm
Right.
100 with you on that.
Yeah. It's
And this,
fascinating, right?
right? It's
It's fascinating.
fascinating, and it is. I think that it is ultimately the question of whether humanity as a species will survive or not is going to hinge on perhaps those very things,
Yeah. Oh,
right?
absolutely.
I mean,
I
I
think
mean,
so.
I'm not just talking about America. I'm talking about the whole planet,
Well, yeah.
right? And so, how we get there? Well, I mean, boy, oh boy,
Well, I think we
you and I need lots of bottles of wine to solve
well,
the problems. But
well, it's interesting. Our current president, it's nothing new, right? It's
sure,
quite old. I mean, even
yeah,
before Andrew Jackson, it's arguably.
absolutely,
I
right,
mean, some of the things that he's doing have
right.
happened before. He's not new at all. Right? George Wallace was very
Mm-hmm.
closely
Right.
aligned with many of, in fact, many of the things that Trump says actually are almost
Yeah.
verbatim things that George Wallace has said. So Trump is nothing new. In fact, Trump is quite old. Right?
Absolutely. It just
Trump, right,
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 right, right.
right.
People who
But the
think that this is new are like, where have you been?
Yeah, yeah. What's sinister though, and what's truly
Yeah.
kind of diabolical,
Right.
is the reach and the immediacy of the reach.
Yeah.
So Andrew
And
Jackson,
that's
George Wallace. I mean, these men never had
they didn't have
tweets.
Twitter. Yeah,
They
they
didn't
didn't have
have
right.
the whole machine. That's new, and
Mm-hmm.
that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I still think it's recoverable. I don't think it's permanent.
Yeah.
It'll take time,
Yeah.
but it's for us progressives, assuming.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very interesting to start to understand how social contracts, an inability to agree and exchange facts, and
Yeah.
faith. By the way, individually defined
Yeah.
faith,
Yeah. Right.
not faith that's sanctioned.
As in right, as in a
Right, right,
institutional faith,
right.
right?
So
Yeah,
my
right, right,
sister's a
right.
Christian. I'm Christian. My sister, well, we our Christian faith, it's very
They're
different,
very different,
right?
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 Yeah, yeah,
What do they call
right,
a la
right.
carte? It's got an a la carte
It's the
kind of thing,
buffet
right?
of Christianity.
Yeah,
I
I'm
think
going to
I'll have a
choose
little
this.
bit of this and a little
Yeah,
bit of that.
very different, right? So it's
Right.
not sanctioned; it's individual.
Yeah.
We'll see. I mean,
Yeah.
I think 2021 will prove to be even more interesting than 2020.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe.
You're quite right. And I said at the beginning, may we be blessed to live in interesting times. And
Oh yeah,
I think
2021.
we are
Yeah.
blessed. It's not just about Mac coming out with Mac Silicon, and it's about a
No,
lot
I
more.
mean, yeah. For me, I try to think about what is the one word for me that would describe 2020, and then just as interesting, what's the one word or phrase that would describe 2021?
Yeah.
I think for me, 2020, if I had to choose one word, it would probably be confrontation.
Mm-hmm.
To not
Mm-hmm.
retreat, to go head first
Right.
against the wind into conflict.
Right.
And I tried to, even in the piece that you just played,
Yeah.
there's a certain amount of reputational risk for sure.
Uh-huh.
But, the piece is saying something about 20 in a confrontational, I would say,
Sure.
confrontational way. I
Sure.
think for 2021, though, as we're doing right now, I want to get to conversation and even conversion.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get to more conversation,
Yeah. Yeah.
more resolution,
Right.
and
Right.
just more dialogue.
Yeah. Conversation is really if one can get to conversation, an honest conversation,
Honest conversation.
that's where if you can keep engagement in the conversation, I think that's a real point of progress, and then eventually, like you said, it may lead to eventually, like you said, I used conversion was your term, but conversation is an important part, but honest conversation. Oftentimes, and we've seen this in social media, these conversations go past each other.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they don't meet. They don't meet with earnestness and honesty and in exchange. And but yeah, man, I don't. I wanted to ask you about the reception to this piece. But I also want to. I mean, first of all, I mean, I've been talking about music. So we're both composers, we're musicians, and so like the music nerd in me is also doing music nerd things. Uh, but but I also think that this conversation is incredibly important to have. So I don't want to just sort of go, well, then tell me about this. Uh, the Well, okay, I've got actually a number of questions, but one is that how, without giving too much away, how does the rest of the piece play out? I mean, can you give sort
Well,
of like a
that's
teaser?
the whole piece. The piece is just one
Oh,
movement.
is it just the one movement? I thought it was
Yeah, yeah.
more. Oh, I thought you
No,
had
no,
more
that's it.
to it.
That's the whole piece. Yeah, yeah.
Oh
So you
man.
heard the whole thing. That's it. That's how the piece plays
Well,
out.
okay. Why don't I ask? Okay,
Yeah.
man. Why don't I ask you then a second? Uh, could
Yeah.
you imagine an epilogue?
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean,
Like in other
it's
words,
also, yeah, sure. I mean, the length of the piece is also part of, I don't want to say part of COVID, but
sure.
I've been asked to write a lot of shorter pieces
Mm, mm-hmm.
because I think on the one hand, there's just not a whole lot of money. There's just not as much funding anymore. So less
It's
money,
another issue.
I think
Yeah.
for a lot of people means less time, but it's also a sign of the times that we're having to go from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting. Even the
Oh, no
concerts we
kidding.
play,
Right.
every piece on there. They didn't play Mahler's Fifth Symphony; they played the Adagietto
Okay.
from
Yeah.
from the
Right.
Fifth Symphony. So
Right.
we're just looking at things from a much more compacted
Right.
overall point of view, which
Right.
I've never had a problem with.
Sure. Sure.
I don't worry, nor do I think that there's a connection between duration and our ability to focus or not focus.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Right.
That's a whole nother. We can
Yeah,
talk
absolutely.
about that some other
Absolutely.
time.
Right.
But as far as an epilogue or something goes, um, sure. I mean, I feel that I feel that if anything, hmm, well, I feel that too many. It's almost a kind of nepotism.
Right.
The
Yeah.
San Francisco Symphony had an opportunity to be as radical as the city itself, and who was going to lead its symphony
Mm-hmm.
after MTT, after Michael Tilson Thomas. They chose Esa-Pekka Salonen.
Yeah.
Big mistake. Wrong. For all sorts of reasons.
Uh-huh.
I'm sure he's a very nice man. We've met a few times. He is. He's a nice
Mm-hmm.
guy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He doesn't understand San Francisco, and he sure as hell doesn't understand this moment. Now,
Well,
try as he
yeah,
might,
right.
he's hired and he's done these things with artists as ambassadors, whatever they call it. I don't know.
Right.
But the real
Right.
money, talking about the New
Right.
Jersey Symphony,
Right.
very modest fee, which I was happy to do the piece. You can tell by that video,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot of investment.
Yeah. And by the
But
way, beautiful recording of sound wise.
that too, big
Lovely,
time investment.
great, wonderful
Right.
playing, Right. Yeah,
Absolutely.
right.
So for a Black composer, this is important stuff. This is investments being made.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem I have is when Esa-Pekka Salonen, who should not be in that position because he
Mm-hmm.
can't understand that city or this moment,
Mm-hmm.
then starts to make other artistic choices. So he
Right. I
chooses
see.
Nico Muhi to create a 19-minute piece
Mm-hmm.
with all of these people in it, including Esperanza Spalding, incredible
Mm-hmm.
Black woman, who happens to be this incredible, one of the most important jazz
Yeah,
musicians
yeah,
around right now.
phenomenal.
My
Right.
opinion,
Yeah.
right? I have a problem with that. To put it more bluntly, and I know you, and I love you, and I know you, but we have to talk about facts. The fact is, we don't need to be commissioning Philip Glass or Steve Reich or Nico Muhi right
Well,
now.
I mean,
We just don't.
because first of
don't.
all, Steve and Philip and they
Yeah.
don't need the bread.
They don't need the bread. They don't need the reach.
They don't need the
We don't need to hear
playtime,
from them.
right?
That's not what this moment's about.
Yeah, absolutely.
No?
I
And by the way,
I agree with you.
yeah, and I'll go a step further. I've had a certain amount of success. Nobody needs to commission me right now. Nobody
Mhm.
does. I mean,
Mm.
I've already been in positions where I have literally said, commission someone else, and they have literally said, well, if we don't, if it's you or nothing or whatever the situation is, and let me
Ah,
not get into this in too
yeah,
solving a way,
yeah.
other than to say, myself as a composer, black or not, I've had a fair amount of success.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And really, what our industry needs to do is look to women, look to women of color, look to young women of color who
Right.
actually really have a lot to say,
Right.
need the investment, and
Right.
will do, in my opinion,
Do
be
a great
much more
job.
relevant.
Yeah, right.
Much more relevant.
Absolutely. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
And to be specific, it should never have been Nico Mohi. It should have been Esperanza Spalding. It could have been Jesse Montgomery. I mean, Gabriella, we went to school with,
Yeah, right.
right?
Right.
And by the way, just to connect everything, why the hell hasn't the Met commissioned any of them?
Uh-huh. Well,
But and before that
I
time,
think
all
you
right,
mentioned I
that's
think
right. And before that, Tanya Leon too. So
right. Yeah. Yeah.
what are you waiting for? Oh my
Yeah.
God, sorry, I was going to
No,
church.
no, no, man, look,
So frustrating.
man, well, this
No,
this again it's unfortunately kind of like Trump, it's a long-standing problem.
yep,
It's come into focus,
yep,
just like Trump has come into focus with his technology and the spread. A lot of this stuff has come into focus of like what you and I have probably known for, 30 years,
yeah.
but a lot of other people are like, "Oh, wait a minute. Really?" Right?
Well, there's this wonderful viral video of every vice president,
Uh-huh.
like about 2 seconds of their portrait. Then, of
Just kind
course,
of bing, bing, bing.
boom,
Right, 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 right,
and
right,
then
right.
put Kamala. And just that alone, you're like, wow.
Right.
It's
There's
the same
a
thing
there's a
for our
moment.
presidents, then boom, Obama.
Sure.
It's kind of
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
I think as men, well, two quick things. As men, we really have to understand that with it is such a golden age. It's such a revolutionary time for women and women of color in our country.
Yeah, right. Right.
Son,
This
that's
is
where we're
this is
going. That's right.
a huge
That's where we're going.
thing, right?
That's
Yeah,
right.
right.
And I think if there's any hope for classical music, operatic music, or our field, the performing arts field, it has to be a deepening of that elevation and that listening and that respect and that service and support of women and women of color.
Hmm.
The more we, especially as men, Elliot, you and I, the more
Right,
we
right.
can truly understand what 2021 is and what it could be, and our role, our real role in it, which is just take 2 steps back.
Hmm.
It is so ironic, not
Yeah.
ironic. It is so not ironic that as I say that, and as people are dying, and
Yeah.
as in their last breath, so many of these people will presumably be cared for by women, just sheer
That's
numbers,
true. Yeah,
right? We talk
absolutely.
about our
Right.
first
We're talking about our
responders,
first
sounds like
responders or whatever. Yeah,
firefighters
right,
with higher
exactly.
hoses. No,
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 it's the
no,
right.
right?
It's
A
yeah.
hospital is run really by women, by nurses.
Well, every good organization is run by women.
Yeah, well,
I
well,
mean,
that's a whole other thing. And
right, right,
I'm not
right.
saying they're not doctors or surgeons. That's not the point I'm trying
Yeah,
to make.
yeah,
The
yeah.
point I'm
I
trying
know,
to
I
make
know,
here
I
is
know.
that
Right, right.
we have to. I think as men, period, we have to understand that our country has and will be better served by the morality and the leadership of women.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not lost on me that say what you want about Hillary Clinton, had she won, the performing arts field would not be in the predicament it is right now.
Yeah, right.
And at the
Right.
very moment I'm sorry. At the very moment I say that, that man is fighting for himself. I mean, what better example of male dominant privilege
Uh-huh. Yeah.
than the golf playing man?
Absolutely.
He might as
Who's
well have a
just
violin in his hand.
just
Nero, Rome is burning down, right? I mean, he might as well.
right, absolutely. It's just kind of like fetch me wine while everything goes to hell, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, seriously. Yeah. Well, sometimes these kinds of moments of kind of stress uh call people to action and also bring people to the table for conversation. I'd like to think that these sorts of things and uh you know are um I like to think optimistically about our predicament as a species and also this country. I can only hope for everyone's sake. I can hope for not just my sake, but also for like your son's sake, for example. And I'm sure that as a parent, your fight isn't really about your fight. It's about everyone else and your son and the life that he will have going forward. I, I can only imagine for you deeply, deeply important in a way that I don't understand as a parent, but you do. Um, so it's a big thing, man. And I hate to we started talking about all this and now we're rolling up on the 9 o'clock hour, and I don't want to take your time beyond a certain, it's like you mentioned earlier, we're going from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting, and so here I am. I asked you to be in another, practically speaking, another Zoom meeting.
No problem.
So folks, if you have questions for Daniel, if you're watching this show after the live premiere, I know there's probably some of you are watching and haven't spoke up, but please make some comments about anything we've discussed. Ask questions. I will monitor the discussion section of the YouTube and the Facebook, and pass questions on to Daniel too. I'd like to, Daniel,
Yeah.
maybe outro, at least before I do my closing thing. I'd like to maybe play a little bit more music of yours.
Oh, sure. Okay.
I think we had something else that we queued up of yours. That was the Requiem for the Living in Color.
Oh, that's
There.
yeah.
Well, now
Yeah.
again, about another hour of time of
Yeah.
talking, right?
Maybe, I don't know if you have Love is the Only Word Sweeter Than Black.
Yes,
Yeah, that might be nice.
I-
It's
yeah,
1 minute long. It's from the opera. We Shall Not Be Moved.
from the opera. Yeah. Do
which
you,
is a great.
while I pull that video up, do you want to set up the opera a little bit for
Yeah,
people?
the opera is begins where once factual story ends. The MOVE organization in Philadelphia in 1985 was bombed.
Right, right. I
Philadelphia's
remember that.
local.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
by using this incendiary device to kind of flush out the multicultural members of the MOVE organization,
Yeah.
they engulfed in flames nearly 100 wood frame homes,
Yeah.
an entire Philadelphia block.
I
And 11
remember
people
that like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Man. Jesus.
and 11 members of the MOVE organization,
Yeah.
who had all adopted the last name of Africa after John Africa, their leader.
Mhm.
11 died, including 5 children.
Mhm.
So the opera picks up with 5 runaway children from current day Philadelphia who have decided they no longer want to be in school. They want to learn from the ghost of the children in this house, abandoned house. And a truancy officer is trying to get them out of the house and get them back into school. So what you're about to play is an aria from the opera, the libretto by the great Marc Joseph, directed by the great Bill T. Jones.
Mhm.
Bill T. Jones as director and choreographer. This is a snippet from the aria "Love Is the Only Word Sweeter Than Black," where John Blue, who's a transgender character in the opera, is singing about, well, love is the only word sweeter than black.
Great. All right. Great. All right. So we'll listen to this and we'll come back and say good night. But
right.
let's have a listen to this. I will switch over the view here and get this queued up. Oh, okay. Switch over and we'll see you in a few minutes.
Oh, gee, say, love yourself, baby. Oh, gee, say, self-love leads to sex love.
Oh, gee, say, time did not reconcile me to my chains. It made me familiar with them.
Say black and hear yes. Say black and hear enough. Say love is the only word sweeter than black. Love is the only word sweeter than black. Love.
that triangle.
It's great.
Yeah, that's
It's
so
a
funny.
beautiful melody too, man.
Oh, thank
Have
you. Yeah.
have you made this into like a tune that people could play, like you
Oh,
know,
yeah. I mean, it's in the opera. It's probably 4 or 5 minutes long
uh-huh. Yeah.
as an aria, as a song. But we just get a minute and 10 seconds of it here.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's it. I've always written what I thought was right.
Yeah.
You know, I
Right.
know that's hard. It's hard for young composers,
Yeah.
especially when you have someone bearing down on you.
Ah, right.
But
As
but I'll leave you with that. I'll leave your viewers
yeah.
and anybody who eventually will, have the audacity, have the courage to, and now's the time for it, to push back, to
Mm-hmm.
say no. You are allowed to define yourself. If you say you're a student, then you're a student. But if you say you're an artist, then you're an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Mm-hmm.
becomes a much more interesting conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Daniel, man, this was really great to have you on. It
Oh,
seems like the hour and a half went by very quickly. You and I probably could have spent 6 hours talking,
yeah,
probably boring everybody to tears. But this is it was great to catch up after many years, but also this is the first of what I hope to be many conversations, both
absolutely.
both in person and out of person, or not an out of person conversation, but you know what I mean.
I know what you
Both
mean.
in and out.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, and hopefully in person. Speaking of in person,
Yeah.
actually,
Mhm.
so great. Thank you, man, so much.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Appreciate
Right.
it. Appreciate it
We'll be
very
in touch.
much.
We'll do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'll switch over here to the outro, me at the end. Okay, great. Folks, I really appreciate you spending some time with us tonight. Um, I'm going to queue up for next week, which is really not next week, but in 2 weeks, I'm going to have, there he is, Joe Locke, fantastic vibraphonist, extraordinary jazz player and composer, really amazing. I hope you can join us for that. And also, I'm going to switch back to me here. I'm going to put the little subscribe button up there. Oh, wait, I always get this wrong. Over there. Please subscribe if you are new to the channel. I think I'll just leave with this. Please stay safe, practice responsible social distancing, and we will see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you very, very much.